I didn't want to give you a long lecture or presentation about my subject of expertise, in the sense that I didn't want this to be a lecture on multilingualism or on education, but I'd like to get you to think about and to understand how the project came about and about why Mother Tongues exists and how we went from having obviously a festival and a year-round program to developing and thinking about the museum that now you can see in the West Cork Arts Centre. And it's great to be here with Tomasz, who also shared the experience of being part of the summer school in cultural diversity, and that has been collaborating with us even from before the time we came up with this idea. And I wanted to mention the fact that I'm a parent because in a way, even though I've always been a researcher and always interested in studying children, many of you might understand that when you have your own children, it's not the same as studying someone else's children. It's not the same as seeing things from the outside. And when I was first, a new mother, I was living in England and my son was about 18 months old. And as I said, we were living in England at the time. There was a very nice parent and toddler morning in our local area that everybody was very welcome to attend. It was a really incredible family centre, very well organised. And we used to go every week. And one day a speech and language therapist came as a visitor to tell us about language development, and she asked all of us a few questions about our children. And one of them, the questions she asked me was, how many languages do you speak at home? And is your child speaking? Is he saying many words? Because he's 18 months old now. And how many words does he say? And at the time, because of course, I'm also a researcher, one of my students was studying my son and as part of her research project. So I knew exactly how many words he could say in each of the languages, how much he could understand, because she was doing quite a lot of study on him. But I suppose when I was in that space, I was just a parent and I saw an expert who's a speech and language therapist, someone who really understands how language development works. And she seemed quite concerned about my answer, that he could probably say 5 words altogether. And I said, well, maybe he knows 5 words in English, 5 words in Italian, but that's pretty much, that's all he's saying at the moment. So even though I didn't say much more, she immediately said to me that he needed to be diagnosed or, assessed maybe more, because she felt she could just spot, or she could just quickly diagnose something that was language delay. And at the time, I was happy that I had the knowledge I had, that I had the observations I've made, because I wasn't too concerned. But that experience is something that really stayed with me, that someone had just made that remark about my child potentially having language delay. And language delay is serious. It's not something that you're just happily diagnosed without having really put thought into it. But then you think, this is 11 years ago and things change and we're much more used to bilingual, multilingual children. But really, probably 7 weeks ago, I was at a parent-teacher meeting, which happened on Zoom because we're in a new era now for parent-teacher meetings. And there were some really lovely comments about my daughter, who is my second child, how creative she was in her writing and how much she wanted to write. And also the teacher commented on the fact that she writes stories that are above her age, if you like. But then she said, actually, but she makes a lot of spelling mistakes, but this is normal because you speak Italian at home. So even though she was being really complimentary and she was being very positive, she said basically that the reason why my daughter is making spelling mistakes in her writing is because we speak Italian at home. And she didn't blame the Italian. she said this in a passing, kind of as a passing remark. Well, this is normal because you speak Italian at home, and that's why your daughter is struggling with spelling. So this, to me, this is small, and it's almost nothing compared to what might have happened to other people. And obviously, by working with my bilingual and multilingual families, I come across many more stories. And there's a Kurdish friend who moved to Ireland, to the west of Ireland, and was told never to speak Kurdish to her son. And she, of course, followed that advice, and now her son is 18. And very recently, because he's an adult, he decided not to go visit the family anymore because he feels he doesn't have any way to connect with the family, because all he can use is his facial expression, because he has no communication skills in the language of his grandparents. So he thought, why would I bother going to another country and feeling completely like a foreign person, completely unable to understand what's going on, and really like an outsider. And so even though some of the comments that might have been made, or the advice that might have been given to me, to my Kurdish friend, are probably, they're coming from a good place, they could end up having a negative impact like they had on my friend. It's interesting because similar experiences are shared by Irish speakers. So this is not something that happens only to a small group of people who are bilingual or multilingual, but there's so many people who are coming to me often saying that they've been asked, why do you bother speaking Irish to your children? What's the point? And would it not be better to focus on Spanish? Nowadays, there are many more people who speak Spanish or Arabic or Chinese than people who speak Irish in the world. So why do you do it? And so this attitude and this view of languages is something that is not unique to Ireland. It's not unique to Europe. It's something that many of us share, maybe some of this fear around different languages or experiencing linguistic diversity. And it's not about migrants. It's about, again, the freedom of using different languages has not been unleashed yet. And it is a mindset, okay? And the reason why Mother Tongues exists is to change this mindset, is to actually reflect on the fact that being bilingual, being multilingual is positive. It's positive for the lives of children, for the lives of adults, but also for our society as a whole. And our role as an organization is often not only to bring this message, but also we provide training and professional development, because people who are working with children and with families sometimes need to enhance their expertise to cater for the multilingual world we're living in. And this is not something that sometimes people associate with an experience that only affects people living in cities or people living in very highly populated areas. But as you can see, wherever you are in Ireland, classrooms have children who are growing up speaking more than one language. And also they have children who should, by nature, be interested in learning about the fact that there are other languages in the world. And another language is not only a way of speaking, it's a completely different door into another way of thinking, into another way of behaving, and so on and so forth. So our role at Mother Tongues is to create these spaces for professional development, for understanding how we can talk about bilingualism. We can include all the languages in our practice, whether it's working in the early years or in primary. And also, of course, we have to speak to parents, because parents, for me especially, are key here. The parent is the one who makes an initial decision for the child to raise the child bilingually or not, or to prioritize one language over another. And over the years, we've developed resources for parents, because we feel that once the parent has that confidence, like in the example I gave you earlier, when I was told, the problem is that you speak Italian at home, I had the instruments to think for myself and to say, actually, I know the fact that I speak Italian at home. This has nothing to do with my daughter's spelling in English. And so I think those instruments are very important for parents. But of course, as I described, the importance of interacting with people who are working in education, who play a very important role. Parents are obviously extremely important, but children are a very key element in our work, because anybody who works with children understands children have these incredible minds, and they are also very sensitive to others and to who they are in relation to others. So growing up bilingual, growing up maybe with parents who come from different cultures, gives children makes children different from a child who has not lived that experience, if you like. So difference is in every one of our classrooms in many, many shapes and forms. And with our program, which we call Language Explorers, we actually go inside the classroom. We go into the early year settings, we go inside the primary school classrooms. And we started this in 2018 with the view of engaging directly with the children, because it's all very nice to go to the teacher and explaining why multilingual approaches are beneficial for all children. It's all very good to say to the parents, keep speaking your mother tongue because it's going to be beneficial for life. But we also want to speak to children. The children need to see and experience multilingualism in the classroom. And I could have hours and hours of quotes of what the children have said about it. I would actually put a link in later. We have a podcast. Called Mother Tongues on RT Junior. And on that, you can actually hear the voices of the children telling us about the languages they use in the home, telling us about why they love to play in different languages. So I'd definitely recommend to listen to the children. But one of the most surprising things for me is meeting children, asking them, what language do you speak? And the teacher saying, I actually did not know that this child could speak Polish, because their English is incredible. They've been perfectly integrated into the classroom from day one. And I never realized that this child speaks Polish because their father speaks Polish, for example. So it is really important to have these conversations, to get the children to speak about who they are, about their families. And some of the stories are not necessarily like my mother or my father. They might be about another family member or someone they're really attached to who speaks another language. And often another surprising thing is that children in the classroom feel that they cannot speak or write or do anything in the language of the home. So they see a really clear separation between this is home and this is where we use this language. But in school, either we're not allowed or we feel we're not allowed, because often there's no rules saying that you can't, but there's that feeling that maybe it's not appropriate because no one understands you. And what's going to happen if people don't understand you? It's written in, like we say in Italian we say it's written in black and white in the primary language curriculum, that it's the teacher's duty to promote multilingualism, to foster home languages, to ensure that children are in school growing and developing each of their languages. And that goes for English, it goes for Irish, of course, and for any other language that they may be developing at home or learning for passion. So it's not something that we believe in because it's very nice. It's something that is rooted in the child's development from a linguistic and emotional, social point of view. And it's part of the curriculum that teachers are delivering in every school in Ireland, both in Irish medium and English medium schools. And for me, the most rewarding moments really are when we go inside the classroom and we see children and their eyes when they see someone who speaks their own language, like an artist visiting the classroom and saying a whole introduction to, not just hello, how are you, but just having a full 2-minute conversation and asking the children, how are you? And they would see an artist who is very different, of their own ethnicity, maybe their own nationality, their own linguistic background. And the face of the children is something that I would recommend everybody to experience, because, to see, because it does show us how important it is that children see role models such as artists who are different from what is now normally the standard Irish teacher, who is likely to be from a specific, let's say, ethnic, national background, and also from a certain socioeconomic background, at least in many parts of the country. So the other really beautiful thing about discussing languages and multilingualism is that it's not only about migrant children. It's not only about children who feel really confident in Irish and they want to be able to show it off, which is great, but it's about every child in the classroom. Every time we count in different languages, every child is learning. Every time we play a game in different languages, every child is opening up their mind. I remember in one of the classes, I entered the class, that was a few years ago, and I started to just speak Italian as I would if I wasn't inside an Italian class. And a child put his hands on his ears because he didn't want to listen to me. Straight away, he felt it's making me uncomfortable. So what we're trying to do is move on from that and say, yes, I understand it is uncomfortable to be in an unknown space where you don't know what's going on, where you don't know what this person is saying. But maybe this is our moment where we try to understand each other, where we start to try to have a dialogue. And maybe if you really listen carefully, you will pick up one or two words. And we play a lot of games where actually children realize that they know so much more and they have the potential to understand others, even if the language is unfamiliar. So our message is shared. Obviously, as an organization, we continue to advocate for multilingualism, and we see change on a daily basis in front of our eyes. And we hear, more importantly, stories of teachers implementing multilingual approaches in their classroom. And this is a recommendation of the Council of Europe that only this February recommended that plurilingual intercultural education should be embedded in every state in the every European state, because it brings democracy. It brings, it's not only about language, it's not only about culture, it's about democracy in education. And what they say, actually, I have the quote here, they say the efficient functioning of democracies depends on social inclusion and societal integration, which in turn depend on an understanding of, respect for, and engagement with linguistic and cultural diversity. So these are not my words, these are the words of the Council of Europe, which represents every European country, including Ireland, of course. And so that's why I think talking about linguistic and cultural diversity is key, as in starting of this dialogue about getting to know each other, respecting each other, our differences of language and culture. And it's not only for migrants, it's not only for Irish speakers, it is something that is for everyone. And this is exactly where all our projects stem from. And I decided not to give you a long list of projects because we have a beautiful website that I really hope as many of you will go visit. It's mothertongues.ie. But this is what motivated the work that we commissioned Tomasz to do, that is really embedded in this idea of every child engaging with linguistic and cultural diversity. So, Tomasz.
Amazing. Thank you very much, Francesca. I don't know how I can follow that up, but I'll try to do my best from my perspective of a Polish person living in Ireland, where English is not my first language. And definitely sometimes I feel great difficulties speaking English, but I also observe my children, as you're saying, how they integrate and how they find themselves in this society and in these lingual circumstances. Thank you very much. That was very rich introduction to your practice, your incredible way of thinking and the extended practice of the mother tongues. So I would like to share a little bit of my perspective. So we had this couple of months of conversation about what could be part of this interactive experience which will relate to language. And eventually, through each conversation, we were moving slightly further and we were discussing what could become a really, really interesting experience for somebody who would like to touch, who would like to move something, who might be interested in technology maybe. So all these letters come from alphabets that we have chosen that symbolize as many families of languages as we were able to involve and access here in Ireland, in terms of storytellers who were invited to tell their stories, who are part of the storytelling well that you can see on the slide on the left. And there are plates that hold those stories. The plates have their symbols engraved in them, and all the symbols are existing symbols. They come from pyramids in terms of hieroglyphs. They come from Chinese signs. They come from cultures that the stories relate to. Again, I was trying to think about languages that fascinate me and that sort of create also a little bit of a mystery. And I created this sculpture, which I call the Incal, which relate to the knotted languages that we still have to develop some kind of ways of talking about, because that's another conversation that we had with Francesca and with Kate, that there is a lot of interaction happening with the museum, but there is also a lot of material that is sort of hidden, that can be unpacked, that can be shared with the participants if we can develop proper material that can support the interactive experiences. So this sculpture is called A Screen of Memory, and it holds all these alphabets. And for me, it's this kind of metaphorical space where the languages exist. And I was told that a lot of languages die, that maybe a language dies a day. Is that true, Francesca? I don't know, I heard it somewhere. But anyway, I have this vision that they are not lost, because we are sharing this kind of multilingual space and this kind of consciousness together. And so there is some kind of form of memory where all these languages are being stored through our experiences. So anyway, this polished piece of metal is reflecting in a particular way what is in front of it, but it is disturbing it as well in a metaphorical way, the way the memory does disturb what happened in the past. It is a metallic surface which allows to hold all these letters and the plates. And the plates, as you can see, they have different symbols. The symbols come from different cultures, from different alphabets. Some of them hold runic alphabets, and they are all connected with the cultures of the stories that they hold within themselves. And the stories are being activated by the next sculpture. That's how some of the plates look. So they have different words, sometimes poetry, symbols that also look through the time, how different ways of speaking and using language was evolving in time. And when they are presented here, and when they are presented near these readers, they activate the stories that are hidden in the well, and they are being told, being played in different languages by different people who live in Ireland, who use their languages, and who expressed, in this case, their cultural identity and shared that identity with the children through their stories. Yeah, so here is another example of the knotted language of the Incas. And yeah, I think it would be great to prepare more material that can unpack it and create more meaningful workshops for children to engage with the information that was stored in those knots in the past. There is also a scroll which allows for looking into calligraphy, and again, workshops of creating the signs and explanation about how the signs relate to reality, how this form of writing, coding, was invented, how different it is from our alphabets and our letters and our ways of writing. I think it enriches and opens up a different way of thinking about language. Here it's a very interesting interaction that was developed by a fantastic person, Mankan Magan, who looks deeper into the Irish language, and he shared with me his knowledge about colors and about multiple meaning of different words that describe colors in Irish. And I created this puzzle based on his observations and his excavations of certain words. And I created a puzzle that has got one description, one word in Irish, and on the other side, description of that word in different ways on the other side of the puzzle. And those puzzles were then translated onto the Braille language, because for me, the question about how people who can't see, how they perceive color, what a color is for them, it always fascinated me. I was never able to answer it, and I have many different ways of thinking about it, but even just being able to create this kind of space for observation and the speculation for children to wonder about it and to experience this kind of different way of coding and thinking, I think it's very important and very, very interesting. So that's how it looks now, and I hope that you will have a chance to come and visit it in Uillinn. And maybe Kate can say a little bit more about how it looks now. She has got very fresh experience of people coming to the gallery today, I guess.
Yeah, so I had the first group of students in today. So we had 5th class from Scoil National School, and we also had some students from Cape Clear, and they absolutely loved the exhibition. As you said about kind of providing a space that is just playful and kind of just contrasting to the usual gallery experience, like straight away when they came in, as long as like the minute you tell them that they can touch, it's so intuitive, they just go for it and they know what to do. You don't have to give instructions, they start playing instantly. So every single one of the works, and the gallery was just, it was lit up. And yeah, I had kind of the pleasure of being the kind of public engagement artist during the last kids exhibition that Tomasz was involved in as well. And it was the exact same. And there's something so freeing about allowing that space within the gallery for kids to interact. So my job as the public engagement artist is to design programs around these kind of exhibitions. So the program that I designed around this exhibition is, I'll just put this in for you. It's called Worlds Within Words. It's so I was kind of interested in this idea of words that don't exist kind of in other languages, and how they could be kind of used as starting points to talk about different languages. So these are just some pictures from today from the kids interacting with it. And this is just an example of the kind of the program that I created for the students. So what I did was I researched different words in different languages that we don't have direct translations for. So Irish words such as lis, which is a fort where fairies dwell, which is normally located in a field or in a marshy land. So we have French words, German words, Tibetan words. And so today there was a German child and a French child in the class. So like you were saying, Francesca, of like seeing a child's face light up, that really did happen when there was the German words. He was absolutely delighted. And they then they picked, so what went through the words and discussed them. So some of them are very like, this one, the German word, Weidenstammkeit. So he got to pronounce it for us as well. So that was handy. But the feeling of being alone in the woods, these words that don't have direct translations in English, but we were then able to kind of discuss whether we had that feeling and whether we could relate. So it was a really, really interesting way to kind of, from the exhibition already, they had the curiosity about these other languages. And this was a kind of a really kind of, I feel like it kind of strengthened the kind of the intrigue in other languages. Another really interesting addition that was in the exhibition was we had these tiny little booklets on different languages. So ones for Spanish, Polish, that had stuff like word searches, words to do with food, how to say hello, these kind of things that the students were actually able to take home with them as well. And these are some of the artworks they then made in the workshop. So they picked one of the words from the lists and created the artwork. So this was the German word about for being alone in the woods. This one was the Irish word for the fairy fort on the side of the hill. And this one was Skimplini. So this was effects of light dancing before your eyes, either real or imaginary. So these were the kind of starting points. So this is what they created today in the space of 45 minutes in the workspace in the gallery. And they are going to go back to the classroom and kind of look over these words again and think more about how they could develop these artworks. So they are going to create an artwork in response to one of these words. So yeah, and then their work is then going to be shown in Uillinn in June and July. So I think it's a really effective way to kind of, to just grow that sense of curiosity that they had, and just to kind of continue the conversation. I also kind of gave them a list of questions so that when they're back in the classroom, they can continue to talk about the exhibition and around this idea of kind of languages. So talking about the amount of languages that they know. Could they imagine a world, what the world would look like if they didn't speak, how the rules of languages can differ. And these are questions that we discussed in the exhibition as well. So yeah, I think being there on site with them, really, it just shows how effective the exhibition was. It really just, they were so alive with it. And they had so many questions, even from people. There was another girl actually who could speak Serbian. Just the amount of questions that they got asking them about their languages, and it kind of just broke down barriers. It was amazing to see. Really, really, really effective show.